Anger is a common and potentially very useful and informative emotion. For many of us, though, we can stay angry, revolving in circles and feeling quite stuck or overpowered by it. Or for those of us who may try to block anger for whatever reason, we may feel stuck and pressured and not even exactly know why. Today, we're going to unpack anger, so stick around. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where we explore how understanding through a nervous system perspective can help you transform the way you live, love, and relate. And by the way, if you find value or enjoy these podcasts, please help us by liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. Each week, I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Welcome, Steve. Happy to see you.
Hey, Jeffrey. Great to see you, and great to have all of our friends listening and watching here with us today. Let's jump in. You ready to tackle this one?
Absolutely.
Well, I've been experiencing a bit of betrayal from someone I would have considered a friend. And I find myself, Jeffrey, trying to figure out what to do with my anger, sometimes feeling like I'm not justified in it, sometimes feeling like it's all that I can think about, sometimes wanting to move on and wanting to put what happened behind me. And I'm often reminded of your work on anger. So that's what I want to go into today. I want to talk about your 4 pillars of anger.
Great.
I thought, just to start, to make sure our audience is on the same page, can you just give us the overview of the 4 pillars and why they may trigger this anger state? And then we can kind of dive in and go into some more specifics.
Sure, absolutely. I sort of came up with these discovered them rather, because I spent a lot of years being really angry at myself, at others, and I wanted to understand it more deeply. My experience and through my work with clients and students, I've come to see that there's 4 basic pillars or foundations to what leads us to anger. And they are, number 1, feeling disappointment. Number 2, feeling hurt. Number 3, feeling that something is unfair. Or number 4, feeling that something is unjust. And feeling any one of those can lead us towards noticing we're angry. And oftentimes we'll feel more than one of those, and that strengthens the case for anger. But the reason that this is helpful is because if we're just lost in the anger, it's really hard to work with it or resolve it. But if we can understand that anger arises from a certain type of emotional, mental, or moral pain, then we get a better understanding of the source, and we also become more empowered in how we can work with it.
How does understanding which 4 of these may be at play, how does that empower us to work with it? How do we go from the information to the empowerment?
Well, if I'm aware that I'm just angry, right, that's a good awareness to have. You're angry. When I was younger, actually, by the way, I wouldn't even have been able to acknowledge when I was angry. It was so forbidden in my family. But it would have been easier for me to locate what was underneath the anger. And what I found is that no matter how we try to work with anger itself, it's really difficult. And we get information both about this particular incidents that made us angry, but we also get information about the kinds of themes or feelings that will frequently send us into this state of anger. So we become more able to engage with what's actually happening at this moment and more wise about our personal tendencies. Like, for example, if someone has always felt rage at any sense of injustice, that's a great thing to know. And they're going to feel it whether it's with a social or, civil kind of injustice to certain groups or certain individuals, or whether it even feels like a personal incidence of feeling someone did an injustice to them. That if that's a hot topic for them, that's going to really often lead them to feeling anger. But most of us overlook that quality, or especially the qualities of hurt and disappointment, which also almost always accompany most angers at some level.
I see in my case of what I'm going through now, as well as working with my anger in the past and seeing these things come up, as well as just like reflecting on loved ones who are experiencing a degree of anger around something. It feels like sometimes these lines can get really blurry between a few of these. And in that blurriness, I sometimes doubt myself of whether, like, well, Steve, are you really disappointed here? Are you really hurt? Is that really that big of an issue? And I think I'm trying to find like what side of the what side of the road do I get on, or is this like my shame trying to not allow me to be like, no, that was actually really crappy. That's something that would hurt somebody. I don't feel like I can own that sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you had any kind of parental experiences or caregiver experiences where either anger was suppressed in the family or at times alternatively could be volcanically expressed, most people will have some discomfort in owning the fullness of their anger. If you have shame, that's one of the things that will get in the way of anger, because my shame will usually try to find a way for me to be angry at me. Now, remember, shame is a process, right? It's supposed to keep us safe. And so how it can keep us safe with anger is, instead of getting angry at the other person for hurting our feelings or doing something we feel is unfair, we get angry at ourselves for being too sensitive, for making a mountain out of a molehill, for not having more compassion or understanding, or I'm an adult, why am I letting this bother me so much? And so if you find that that's the internal dialogue, that's also a good pointer that there's anger and that there is an attempt to diminish and contain the anger. And that almost always comes at some level from our relationship to shame.
So we can see that we're angry. We can maybe tie it to one or two or three or maybe all four of these pillars that you're bringing up. Do we work with the information from each of these pillars the same way? It's like what I would do in pillar one, the same as what I would do in pillar four.
Yes and no. There's a similarity in that we're going to want to turn towards each of them and our anger with a sense of kindness. Again, one of the big things I try to emphasize in our conversations and in my teaching is that all of our emotions are also information. Now, they may not be always accurately reflecting the facts of reality, but they will always reflect our take on the facts of reality, how it's landing in us, how we're interpreting it. If I feel hurt or disappointed, then my anger, which is understandable, I can go a little bit below it to actually tune into the hurt that precedes the anger. That's something I can work with, right? If I'm working just with the anger, it gets black and white. Oh, they're wrong and I'm right, right? And I can stay in that position for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily exhaust the anger, doesn't help me come to some kind of resolution. And I think it was supposedly attributed to the Buddha that said, like, resentment is you drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And that's what comes out in our holding on to anger and resentment. And that's one of the reasons I got curious about it is not that I felt anger was immoral. I knew that the longer I stayed angry, the more I felt lousy. I didn't feel good when I was angry. It's not really possible for me to feel good or for anyone to feel good if they're really angry. We're absorbed in a fight state, and we just are kind of hating things or resisting things or fighting things, wanting them to be different. But if I could soften a little and get in touch with the hurt or the disappointment, that both feels more accessible, but also I know how to work with hurt, right? And the first thing you do with hurt or with disappointment is you acknowledge it and sort of move a little bit closer to it. Now, again, here's where shame, just as an example, can interfere. It can start criticizing you for being too sensitive, for letting something get under your skin. You should be stronger than that. So there can be some interference as you try to do this process, and that can be expected for many of us, but it doesn't have to fully stop us if we're anticipating it, or at least holding open that as I try to get in touch with what's driving my anger, I may also hear a commentary that's trying to talk me out of being angry or make me wrong for being angry, which so many of us do. If it's feeling unjust or unfair, then we can both turn towards that, but that is almost always can be traced to a deeper feeling historically in us that we have perhaps been the victim of at other or earlier times in our life, in particular, feeling that we received unjust or unfair treatment. So for many people with abuse histories, trauma histories that came from interpersonal interactions versus natural tragedies, then when it's interpersonally based, we have made very strong feelings like children know when they're being abused that somehow it's unfair, it's wrong, but they may not even be able to put that into words for so many reasons, right? But they can recognize abusive behavior, know it's wrong, and often they themselves will try their best not to express that towards other people. So it gives us a way of working with these sources and how these sources are more tied into our experience than if I'm just staying at the level of flames. If I'm just aware that I'm furious and broiling, right? There's not much I can do about it except expressing it. And, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we had a lot of emphasis on expressive types of therapies. And I may have told this story before, but one of the things I worked a lot with children was to help them express their anger. I had lots and lots of phone books, old phone books in my office. And I had this boy who was furious and beating my pillows with a bataka stick, a foam stick, wasn't really doing it for him. So I brought out a phone book and he gleefully and ragefully tore up page by page and sections of pages and sections of pages and then wanted another. And in like one 50-minute session back then, he'd gone through like 4 or 5 phone books. And I had like, I don't know, a foot and a half of torn paper all over my office. But what I realized with him and many others is that it didn't extinguish the anger. The next week he could come back and have just as much access to the anger. And actually remaining angry keeps fueling the anger. So we learned that it's not like a finite source of energy, that if you just let someone express it or drain it, they feel better. They don't, right? So I became curious about, well, then how else do you help someone move out of anger? And again, I was lucky enough because I was working with a lot of traumatized and abused children. And I knew that underneath their rage was tremendous hurt, betrayal, an ache that felt both profoundly disappointing and left them powerless to do anything about it, especially if they were children. It wasn't safe for them to express their anger directly. They could express it in a safe place like a therapy office, but they had no way of doing it outside of the office. And again, if they're just going to be volcanically spewing their anger, it can be quite dramatic and expressive, but it doesn't drain the pool of resentment. On the other hand, once I got children to be able to express one way or another their hurt and their pain, how unfair being abused or traumatized felt, how wrong it was, unjust in their systems, their little systems, knowing that it was just wrong, right? That actually reduced a tremendous amount of the anger and helped with the level of pain too, because they were now working on the source of the anger. And there was a way that they could change how they were relating to their source. Anger is sometimes we feel hurt and we jump to anger before we actually even recognize we're hurt. And so as we stay angry, it can also protect us from feeling the pain of hurt. It can protect us from feeling our vulnerability. So in general, people can get unstuck with anger if they can begin to sense into right now, what's drawing up my anger, what's sustaining it, right? Or what's blocking me from acknowledging my anger, right? And again, in my family, anger was so dangerous that, I could be yelling at someone and someone would go, "Why are you so angry?" And I'd say in a yelling voice, "I'm not angry." It's like the great proof, of course you are. But at that time, I was so cut off. It was so unsafe to even see myself as an angry person because I had been exposed to how harmful adults can be when they get enraged. I had to deny that in myself, but it didn't stop anger from arising. It actually just stopped me from acknowledging or even then processing it.
So I'm imagining our audience is doing exactly what I'm doing right now and finding the ways that anger is showing up for an incident or a person or some aspect of their past and starting to map am I disappointed? Was I hurt? Did I find that was unfair, that unjust? Can you go a little bit deeper into what you're talking about? Like you said, get a little closer to the hurt or the disappointment, or specifically with being unfair, unjust. What might it look like for someone to continue on this path to getting closer to those things?
Okay, so I had a meeting the other week, and in the meeting, someone was saying that the plans that we had presented for something, that I had presented for something, should be revised. And I know that they were well-meaning, but I found myself having two feelings at the same time. Strong anger, like strong fight energy, and shame. And this is not the first time that this has happened where they co-arise for me. And again, that's a way that my anger can show up because shame was used to keep the anger down or turn it towards me. It was not safe for me to express my anger towards my parents and still hope to be living the next day. So I learned a way of internalizing it. At this meeting when it happened, I wasn't fully conscious of it, but as soon as I got out of the meeting, I could feel the intensity of what was going on in me. And I saw the shame was a way of trying to keep the anger down. And once I recognized that, and because I've been working a lot on this over the years, it sort of allowed the anger, the shame to sort of dissipate a whole lot. And I could turn towards the anger. And then I got curious. So what am I angry about here? And the shame was part of the message too. And the first thing is I felt hurt and disappointed. Hurt that it felt like someone was looking for a problem or blaming something on a problem that wasn't existing and was convinced that, well, this is the right way to go. And I was actually in a position, because of my closeness to what we were trying to create, to know that I'm not infallible. But I know that my intuition about this and my sense about this was correct. And again, part of that is I wasn't able to stand up for that in the meeting because my safeguards are on and I don't want to be disruptive and I don't want to come across angry. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners do that too. They become aware of the anger after the event, not when they're sometimes in direct contact with the person. Sometimes we'll feel it in the moment, but often it's once we're no longer face to face with them or on the phone with them, we can begin to get a sense of irritation or feeling bad. And so I moved towards, well, what am I feeling hurt about? Right? What is this? And I suddenly began getting more in touch with how that's been a pattern in my life, that my voice could be discounted or diminished, or that someone would be telling me that they knew what I was feeling, or they knew what I was thinking, or that they knew what was better than I would. And it's an old wound, right? So these reactions actually weren't just about that person in the meeting. It was just close enough, resonant enough, that it tapped on a storehouse of reactions and reactivity I have about this particular dynamic. Once I was able to move towards that, my anger diminished. It didn't go away, but it became less of like, oh, like I'm really struggling with this, to, oh, I'm pissed off. But I was also able to hold at the same time something that felt more full and more real. Instead of just a slice of me that was anger, is I had anger, but I also had hurt and disappointment. And it made me realize I was relating to the complexity of life in more of its true complexity. Anger makes us want to think about things as black and white, in a binary, good and bad. The other person is bad and I'm good, or I'm bad and they're good. But we lose that nuanced sense, and we lose a sense of connection. And the first place to reconnect is with ourselves and with what was really fueling the anger. Now, I also felt that it was a bit unfair because the person hadn't explored with me the deeper details of what I was proposing. And because of that, they were speaking from just a top line summary. And if they had let me go on or paid more attention, they would have seen that there was so much more information below that top line. So it felt like something was being shut down without even being fully seen or received. And again, that's an old issue for me. Now, this doesn't mean it's just me, right? So I want to be very clear. It doesn't mean we should shame ourselves for that, right? What I was appreciating too was that in the past, I would have just felt shame. And I didn't feel it this time. I had some shame, but I was also very much in touch with my anger and knew that my anger wasn't quote unquote wrong. There was a message that was valuable in that, and I didn't want to dismiss it. So what means is we need to step a little bit into regulation. Because as long as I'm not regulated at all and I'm fully ensconced in the whirlwind of rage or anger, irritation, I will be stuck in that binary thinking. I will be stuck in making the other person wrong and me right. That's just a natural tendency of anger. That's also why we get stuck in it, because we want to sort of take away the other person's humanity and reduce them to bad. And in some ways, we lose our humanity because there's these other things at play. Like I said, there's usually these 4 pillars in some formation that are supporting our anger. And if we're willing to do that little bit of work, it requires first just moving 2 toes into regulation, not having to become 100% regulated, but 5 or 10% more regulated gives me the capacity to look with some clarity at what's going on, instead of just needing to continually prove the person was wrong or behaved wrong or should never have done that. Now, by the way, I'm not talking about an experience of being abused. I do think that that's a little bit more black and white. This didn't feel at the level of abuse or trauma. It just felt like friction that was unnecessary and felt to me like the person was very entrenched in, and this can happen a lot, accepting their belief as reality, right? Sort of taking what their inner sense is and saying, well, that's reality, not even questioning whether they might be foreclosing on other options too prematurely. How does that land?
It has me thinking about the idea that's coming to mind is like letting the other person off the hook for their maybe less than adequate pro-social behaviors or the um, injustice or harm they caused another person. Um, and I think sometimes in holding on to anger, it somehow feels like I'm I'm not allowing you to get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the disappointment and the frustration. And maybe, yeah, I guess what's the path with that, or how do we hold that truth and maybe not have to have the justice that might not arise?
That's a great question. And sometimes it's also discerning what we have an option over and what we don't. So from this conversation, what I walked away with was a sense of next time I have a similar conversation with this person over something that's programmatic, I'm going to work at remaining more in touch with what I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling some of the energy of anger arising, I'm going to use that as a reminder to speak towards what is feeling unsettled in me. So I won't go in necessarily and go, hey, so-and-so, I'm really pissed off at you. Because that's a really quick way to get someone else to be defensive and angry against you. And then discussion or resolution is kind of already ruled out because you've inflamed them.
Or they might have no capacity to understand that they've caused
Right,
a harm
absolutely.
or an injustice or an anger.
Right. But what I would say is I'd speak from my pain or disappointment. I'm feeling unheard. And I really would like it if you could let me finish this and just see if you could get a sense of, from my perspective and what I'm saying about this. I would feel more entitled to try to advocate in that moment. Again, without blaming the other, because I'm really trying to be conscious of the ideas that either way, I want more connection. I don't want to walk away and piss them off because that's not going to make me feel better. And that's just going to make them pissed off and maybe have something circular going on. But what I'm interested in doing is using all of me as a way to come back to connection, but in a way that begins to help diminish the potential for being hurt or disappointed or feeling something is unfair or unjust, right? Even though we all know that life itself is hurtful and disappointing and unfair and unjust plenty of times. But it doesn't always have to be, especially in relationships.
Jeffrey, I was going to ask Jeffrey, what role is blame playing for us in this process?
So blame is very strong when we have anger. Whether the anger is aimed at us, like through shame, we'll blame us. When the anger is externally targeting, we will blame others. So-and-so was wrong. So-and-so was so insensitive. So-and-so was closed-minded. And it helps identify the object of our anger. Again, it's not bad to do that. That's how anger works. But it's information. We begin to lose connection with that our feeling is not necessarily objective reality. It's really talking about how whatever occurred landed in us and in our nervous system. What did it awaken? I want to go back to what you were bringing up earlier on. You were talking about a betrayal. That's very loaded, right? And I'm really glad you used those words. Not everyone will always be aware of that, but certainly betrayal feels unfair and unjust. And it's also going to be hurtful and disappointing. And a lot of us, when we feel betrayal, have an almost immediate impulse to want to pull back from the relationship. And that's not totally wrong. We're seeking safer ground. I don't know how deeply and close. I want to be connected with you if I know that you have once or more times in my past betrayed me, not just disappointed me, but have betrayed me in some significant way. Right? Like a disappointment is maybe you forget my birthday, or we had plans and then you have to break them off for a legitimate reason, but I'm disappointed. I'm disheartened about that. Betrayal is something about breaking trust. It feels bigger. It's a violation. So it really does feel like it hits all four pillars. When something hits all four pillars, it has even more strength than something that just hits one pillar. Right? And when we feel betrayal, we're stuck between keeping the other as enemy or adversary. But that can be useful as a protective strategy. But like I said before, we can still be thinking about it for days or weeks or months after the fact. The other person who betrayed us could be sleeping really well at night, could be enjoying their life. And we're still going around with this kind of heartbreak and anger. The anger usually closes over or covers the heartbreak. Again, I think part of that is to keep us defended, right? To keep us strong so that we don't continue to be vulnerable in a relationship style that could be dangerous for us or feel dangerous, feel unsafe. Because if I have a friend that I want to be close with, I want to feel like we have a good, enduring bond. I don't want to feel like I can count on that sometimes, but other times you may not just forget me, but you could betray me, right? That feels like a crime against the heart, crime against the relationship. But there's things in betrayal that also get us to wonder, am I making too much of this? Am I being a little too rigid? Maybe I shouldn't call this betrayal. Everybody has bad days. And we'll find ourselves trying to diminish that pain because it's hard to hold on to the feeling of betrayal and know what to do with it. So, if I may, how have you found your path through this sense of betrayal? Where do you feel you are with those feelings now? Do you feel more anger? Do you feel more at peace with it or not?
Now I'm feeling more at peace with it. Working with understanding your four pillars has helped, which is the impetus for getting this out. Understanding where I was or the root of what was going on helped me contextualize it. It gave me some language to be able to respond back because my first attempt at responding back, I felt so much energy that I was actually shaking while I was writing the text back. That's how frustrated and upset and pissed I was. It helped me find a place for that over the past few days. There's something in it that it's a relationship that while I wouldn't have wanted it to go away, I realized that is probably an easier path for me than trying to maintain this relationship. That in my particular case, it's not a incredibly close friend I see day in, day out. It's not clearly a relative or a loved one. So I can make that decision. I'm upset. I'm sad. I'm sad I have to make that decision.
Sure.
But when I realize, like, do I really feel like getting into this with this person?
No,
I don't
right.
have the energy for that. And at first I thought that was me just actually going into like a lower nervous system state of like wanting to flee and run away of like, I don't feel like dealing with this. I'm going to shut down. I don't want to, cause that's a pattern for me. But in understanding, I don't really have the energy to explain to this individual all of the ways that I find their behavior disappointing or hurtful or unfair. And it was easier for me to just disconnect.
Sure, absolutely. So I wouldn't think about going low energy towards, collapse and shutdown as anything other than a true message. Your nervous system was depleted and deflated by what occurred interpersonally. And sometimes we need to go there to lick our wounds a little bit and also get clear, right? I think it's also a point of wisdom to begin to discern what relationships can we speak truth to where there's a high chance of it being at least received, versus what are the relationships where we can speak truth all we want and the other person will not only not take it in, but will turn it around and attack us. And if that's a higher likelihood, like you, I'll begin to back out of that, because it feels like that person is probably not going to really be interested in hearing my experience with this or going to want to defend against it. And I need someone who can acknowledge it and maybe make a repair about it instead of trying to tell me I was wrong. Because I also had that growing up too, and I know that that never goes anywhere good. Right? So what did you notice from the 4 pillars? What was this betrayal tapping in you the strongest?
Disappointment and hurt.
Okay.
I didn't expect someone that I considered a friend and who I thought considered me a friend would take the steps and actions they did. And that was disappointing to me. I also have a thing in my life where I value my time, and I went to a lot of length to make a scenario work and connected with a lot of other people and spent a lot of my energy trying to put something in place, only to have this person back out and blame me for something and make up a story. So I guess I felt that it was unjust. Like, you just stole a bunch of my time that I'm never going to get back to make this decision that isn't even true anyway. So there was a degree of that in my experience as well that I was navigating at the time, as it kind of relates to the pillars.
So thank you for sharing that. There's also something you introduced that is kind of mind-boggling for folks, and that is when we're hurt and disappointed, or feel unfair and unjust, or all of them, and then someone phrases it as, but because you did this. Like, if we begin to talk to them about it, or if they're even explaining it themselves, they're already not owning any part of the conflict. They're actually saying, I'm betraying you because of what you said and did. There's something about that non-ownership which is also powerful information. It's hurtful, feels wrong. But for me, it's also a sense of, oh, okay, this tells me about that person's, at least right now, their capability to be in a relationship that's truly mutual and reciprocal, right? And if they're going to distort things and blame me for why they're backing out or disappointing me, that's really like gaslighting, right? Which is a narcissistic tendency to make us doubt our reality and basically say that we're the causality of why this is occurring. You caused me to need to back out. You caused me to need to betray you, right? So it gets a bit convoluted there, but it also leaves us more alone, right? Versus in a relationship where you say something and someone else looks kind of funny, like if you were seeing each other when he said this, and then if he was capable of going, wait a minute, is this landing into the wrong way? Are you getting upset? Do you have some feelings about this? Like, even giving you a door would have probably felt different than having it be a fait accompli. Here, this is what's happening now. I've decided this unilaterally, and it's because of you. That leaves us with no interaction, just collapse. And if we have access to it, fury, strong anger, right? Were you aware of feeling anger first, or confused, which is not really a feeling, but it's where we can go, or could you feel the heartache?
It was the anger. Because I was trying to respond via text message. I was gripping my phone exceptionally tight. So I was angry. I was pissed.
And do you know what the shaking was about?
I think the energy needed a place to go.
Okay.
That was my sense.
Okay.
I mean, I wanted to write an expletive in the text message. That's where my fingers were going, calling him names or being not the person I wanted to be. So I felt like I was on the edge of that energy move.
Okay. Was there any fear on your part about letting your anger be expressed?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pattern for me.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit more about this? Because this is so universal. It stopped me tons of times or got me to diminish because I was afraid of making the other person even more angry. What was your concern, if you can recall?
I think it was wanting to express myself in a way that felt justified and I don't even know the right words. Something I could stand behind. So my fear in the moment of responding was of expressing the anger, of holding the anger, was a little bit like, how is he or how are others going to see me?
Okay.
Do I just accept this graciously? It's no big deal. I'm that kind of guy. Steve's light, he's easy, he's breezy. Or do I go off on him and really burn the bridge? Or, and this is thankfully where I landed, do I find the ability to express, again, sitting with the pillars, like, I'm really disappointed by this. I'm really upset that you had to treat her, like, I was able to get to a point where I could express that, but that was like version 6 of the text message, not 1.
And where was the shaking when you were about to send the 6th iteration of the text?
It was gone. So the energy I was feeling was in the initial me, like, receiving, processing it. What am I going to say back? What happened here? What is he saying? That was when that energy felt like it was bouncing around.
And you also pointed to something that a lot of us also experience, which is, what will other people think of me if he shows this text to his wife, his friends, a community? What will people think of me?
And this is one I want to go into.
Yeah.
Because, and I've got a note here, because he's also part of an extended friend group. And attached to it was his telling of the incident versus my telling of the incident, and also my concern of how I would share what happened with individuals in a way that felt like it responded truthfully, but also in a way that reflected the kind of person I want to be. And that was hard to find. But anyway, I interrupted you, but I wanted to add that extra piece because there's a social side of it.
Right. Again, what I'd say is there's a theme of shame in there. Whenever we get kind of sensitive to what will other people think of me, that's really how shame operates. Sometimes it's about how we'll think of us, but a lot of time, even the majority of the time, it's going to be, how will my parents, my friend group, my spouse, my da-da-da-da, what will they be thinking about me when they see this, hear this, experience this? There was also aspiration. I'm assuming, because the way I know you, you didn't want to tell your friends or other friends in this group about in such a way that it made him all bad, right? That I don't think you wanted to be vindictive. Now, sometimes we want to be vindictive because our anger is so outrageously big and we feel so entitled to do it. And being vindictive tries to still keep the other person defined as being wrong and wanting to punish them by getting other friends to betray them, to return the favor, so to speak. But in the mix, you were aware of that. That's not really how I want to be with this. There was something calling you to something larger, more mature, more tempered, instead of binary, instead of the one-way street that rage is often at, right? So these were all floating around in the same way. And I think that we all bump up against that. I still am concerned at times if I express my anger, that I'll be shamed for it, that I'll be either seen as too strong in my anger or too prickly or too sensitive, which I don't think anyone is, but that was the language used in how I grew up. So there feels like there is this issue about acknowledging our own anger, and then a second issue about expressing our anger. They can be totally different. Sometimes it's just hard for some people, for many of us, just to acknowledge we're angry. And then when we're angry, what do I do with it? Do I write it in my journal? Do I tell my partner about it for the next 15 months? Do I actually let this other person know about it? And do I let them know about it in a clear way or in a FU way and blaming it all on them and making them the evil person? So I think all of these play into how we relate, each of us, to our own anger and others' anger. And again, none of this is wrong. It's all information. The shaking was information. The process you did about thinking about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations of the text was finding a way to have integrity and truth without making it too mild, which would be non-integrous, and without making it unnecessarily vicious, which would be a little bit too aggressive, right? You wanted to find a true path that wouldn't dilute what you said, but you actually didn't want to go nuclear, right? And again, that's a mature way of wrestling with this, right? A lot of us will usually just end up closing it down, trying to get away from it, not speak about it ever again. Some of us will send that text, the FU text and all the expletives in it. And some of us will try to find our way to talking about it, though sometimes we can make the mistake of being too reasonable with someone who's not really capable of receiving reason or fairness. How does that land?
I feel like you were in my brain as I processed all of the different pieces of this. Like I think your analysis of how I approached it and what I was working with were spot on.
I think it's because it's what so many of us do, right? And we do this without sometimes even fully recognizing that we're doing all this work, right? But if we can understand that it's best, not necessarily for the most part, to respond in the moment of the heat of anger, because the state will dictate the story and it will be dictating the harshness of the words, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it can have some unintended consequences to make the field a little bit more muddy, to dig ourselves in deeper into conflict when we really don't want deeper conflict. We want a way out, either by having distance or by having the other person make some kind of a repair. But if we just go in and chop their heads off, we're unlikely to get a repair and we're unlikely to de-escalate it. We're just sort of keeping it rolling a bit.
Well, I appreciate you taking this time and helping me work through my situation, as well as sharing with all of us this idea of the 4 pillars, because it did help me in the moment, and this further clarification helped now. And to our friends out there who are listening, if you have a question, if you're bumping up against something in your life and not quite sure where to put it or how to navigate it, we would love to offer some support here in our podcast. The other thing we do is we take your questions. And if you have one, you can dial 866-357-5156 and leave a voicemail. And it can be anonymous or not. It's up to you. And also, I'll leave in the show notes, if leaving a voicemail is not possible from your country code, or if you'd prefer writing a text or even a voicemail, recording a voicemail and sending that to us via email, that email will be in our show notes. So you can go there and send your questions in. But Jeffrey, thank you yet again for all of your wisdom and insight. And you have gifts. You have free gifts for everybody as well. On top of your wisdom and insight, you've got something out there that unpacks this work a little bit more. Maybe you could tell us about that.
Sure. You get a car and you get a car. So we have a video Steve and I put together called Why Do I Feel Stuck? Keep Feeling Stuck. And you can get it. It's a review of the basic states of the nervous system and also outlines some practices that you can engage in to help you shift from a dysregulated state to more of a regulated state. And you can obtain that by going to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, plural, LINKS. And that'll open up another page which has a link in it for a free gift. Just go and grab it. Steve, thank you as always. Thank you for being willing to share your experience. It's very helpful for us as a community to sort of be able to work back and forth about something. And this feels like an important topic. I know that next to shame, being angry and stuck with anger is another big one that people struggle with. So thank you.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. Thank you for your time, and I'll catch you next week.
Sounds good. And friends, remember that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for seeking qualified healthcare. If you are struggling, please do reach out to obtain help from a qualified healthcare practitioner. Until next time, thank you for being with us, spending this time with us. I'll see you then. Bye for now.